how I'm presenting it. I don't get to teach Chassidus the way I teach it here. We're studying a Maimed, and what we're doing is we're showing what Chassidus is adding to the Nigle. Because without the Chassidus, the Nigle doesn't make any sense. The Pasuk wants to tell us the dinim of Machzah Shekel. It takes 6 psukim. All you need is 1.5 maximum. The other 4.5 psukim were one time. Then when Yidden were in the Midbar, they had to count for a census, they had to give the money for the Adonim, it was for the Kapara for Maaseh Ha'egel. And the question is, why would the Torah Nitzchas, the eternal Torah, have 4.5 psukim that speak to a story that happened only one time, and 1.5 psukim which is Negela Datus? It doesn't seem reasonable. So the Rebbe says you have to look at the Pnimius. What's the Pnimius? The Pnimius is that the Adonim, the Machzah Shekel was for Kabbanis. And Kabbanis has to do with Tefillah. And Tefillah has to do with Moshe Rabbeinu. And when you look at it that way, you realize that all 6 psukim are telling us things that we need for now. Okay, we thank Menachem Mendel HaKotten for bringing the Sfarim, for bringing the books. Does anybody need a book? GAB. Does anybody know what is the abbreviation of GAB?
Get a book.
Grab a book. Come and get it. Melamed. You know what Melamed means in the Gemara? That's a great question. A harness.
A harness?
A harness. Take one for your neighbors. Hello, Zamish Kashvaz.
I'm not.
Good, take 3. You'll give 1 to the B'Shleim Shlita, and 1 to Yisrael HaYalev Shlita, and 1 to the harness. Good, okay, have an extra. Extra. See, here Melamed means you have to have a harness. A darba, a harness. And the harness has these little nails inside that they squeeze your cheeks when you make a mistake. Ooh. And it makes the behavior go straight. Okay, so let's read the questions and the answers. Page Chof Ches. Let's read the questions and the answers. So, what is the chitzonius and what is the pnimius of Machzah Shekel? And in terms of what it was used for. Now, the chitzonius of Machzah Shekel was used for Adonim, for the basis of the Beis HaMikdash. The pnimius of Machzah Shekel was used for karbonis. And karbonis means tefillah. If you want to understand why the Eibishter wastes 6 psukim telling us the mitzvah of Machzah Shekel when it can be said in a pasuk, you have to understand that Machzah Shekel is for karbonis and karbonis is for tefillah. When you put those pieces of the puzzle together, you understand why you have 6 psukim. How is that connected to the 2 levels?
We look pretty self-explanatory.
I forgot what I meant with the question, which is kind of embarrassing, right?
I think you combine them and then see to then separate them.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so let's go on to 227. Practically, each year, what would be the 2 aspects of chitzonius and pnimius of Machzah Shekel? The chitzonius is karbonis, the pnimius is tefillah. And tefillah is connected to Eibishter. Okay? Now, let's go. 228. You with me? You with me? Machon.
Yeah.
Explain the spiritual process of a carbon. A carbon is sacrificing an animal. Okay, now in Hebrew, the word carbon has 2 translations. The first is to sacrifice, and the other is to bring near. And the way it's understood is the animal is sacrificed. And when you sacrifice the animal, it allows the human being to emerge and to come close. And those are the steps. You have to put the animal in its place so that the human being can come out. But when you're sacrificing the animal, you're not just destroying the form of the animal, you're taking the passion of the animal and the pleasure of the animal, aka the blood and the fat, and incorporating it, right? Animals, the blood represents the passion of the animal, the fat represents the pleasure of the animal. Those are the parts that you give the Eibishter. And in Ruchnius, it means that you're taking the animal passions and the animal pleasure and transforming them into pleasure and passion for Teda Mitzvahs, for the Eibishter, for Avodas Hashem. Okay, so the answer to question 228 is, explain the spiritual process of a carbon. You take an animal, you kill it. The blood and the fat you give the Eibishter, so you're sacrificing it. To get the animal to become holy, you have to break it out. But when you get the fat and the passion out of the animal, the richness and the passion out of the animal, of the person, and you give it to the Eibishter, your human being is able to emerge and able to climb higher. And how is it in Tefillah? In Tefillah it is that the earlier steps of Tefillah involve passion, hisrakshus, and as you go deeper into the davening, it becomes deeper and it becomes quieter because the animal soul has been harnessed. If you think about how we daven, of course, especially the way it's explained in Chassidus, the Psukei de Zimra stage, it says in Halacha, the Psukei de Zimra is supposed to say it loud. It's supposed to say it loud. And part of the reason it's supposed to say it loud is because Koil Ma'odet Akavana. When you say it loud, it creates emotion. And that emotion is the language of the animal soul. The animal soul does everything noisy. The divine soul does everything quiet. When you start davening, you don't start talking about the Eibishter. You start talking about yourself. Say to the Nefesh HaBahamis, I like God because. What's the Nefesh HaBahamis going to say? I don't like God. Correct or not correct? Yeah. So you say, okay, let's rephrase the question. I like me because. Why do I like me? Because I get to eat food, I get to drink clothes, to drink tasty wine, and to wear nice clothes, and drive a nice car. He says, and who gave you all those things? God. Oh, so now that's the question again. I like God because He gave me a nice shirt. Not because He's true, not because I have to worship Him, and not because I'm afraid of Him, because He looks after me. That is represented by Paseach Es Yadecha Umasbir L'chol Chayrots, and that's the concept of Psukei de Zimra. Psukei de Zimra is, as the oldest cliche in the book goes, what have you done for me lately? Psukei de Zimra, you're verbringing about the Eibishter on a behema level. It's all about giving. He gives me this and He gives me this and He gives me this and and because He gives me this, and this, I like Him because I like me. But it's not the end of the davening. It's the beginning of the davening. So you get the animal soul on board. You excite the animal soul about the Eibishter for animal soul reasons. But then you graduate from that. Then you go to Birchas Krishma, and now you become more intellectual. And you start to study the Eibishter, not on what the Eibishter has done for me, but on the level of what the Eibishter is. And the presumption is, the concept is, the ideal is, that you redirect the passions of the animal soul towards the Eibishter, so that he's a cooperative collaborator, partner, and then you quiet him and you go past him. So this is the avoida equivalent of sacrificing the animal and allowing the man, the human being, to emerge.
Why can't we use the animal first?
Huh?
Why can't we use the animal first?
You can, but you're never going to make him into a mensch. You're not, at least the pashtus. The animal is going to remain an animal. The animal is stronger than the human being. I remember reading the Fidik Rabbi Sichas. I always think this when I say this, but I don't remember the story precisely. But the Rekuda was, they did the Psmaim Shalanu someplace. And there was a Pashat Yid who was very far from a big chassid, yeah? But he was strong as a bull. And he just wanted to be the one. He wanted to be the one to do it. And the Fidik Rebbe describes a Yid who was far from a chassid who said, listen, I can do this. I want to do this. So you're using the Nefesh HaBahamis and Avodas Hashem, but he's a behemoth. But the culmination, the goal, is to join the animal soul with the divine soul. And that process involves exciting him and then quieting him. In other words, once you excite about the Avodas Hashem, he's not going to be fighting against you, so that you can go higher than it. You follow? So let's read inside, okay? We'll start again from the beginning of the Pedic. I want to finish the Pedic today. It's been going on for too long. Well, what are we doing? We're explaining the Chassidus of the Pasha Machzah Shekel, and explaining the Chassidus of the Pasha Machzah Shekel. You understand why there's 6 psukim to say something that, at least in terms of every year, could be said in a pasuk and a half. In other words, the way we understand Machzah Shekel and Halacha, that you're giving a half a shekel for karbanis, and anybody could give it. You don't have the whole thing about the Chapa Alav Shesechem, and it's not about counting the Jewish people, and it's not for the Adonim. All the details in that Parsha are not relevant to data. So the Rebbe says, wait a minute. If you understand the premise of Machzah Shekel, you understand why it's written this way. Let's read it inside. Hine. Ha'inyan de Machzah Shekel hu. The idea of Machzah Shekel is we bring it. Look inside. Is lahakrev es hakarbonis. Is the sacrifices. Uklol es ha'inyan bazeh. And when you're talking about karbonis, but not about the physical sacrifice of the animal, but ba'avodah, the spiritual sacrifice of the animal is Shaydei zeh, that through the process of sacrificing a korban, makriven oisa magabi hamizbeach, you're taking your animal, offering it up on the altar, lihikolel be'ei shalamayla, you're taking the animal fire and incorporating it into a higher fire, a fire that comes from Hashem, which is called in the Zohar bechinas aryeh de'ochal korbanin, the kidmus ari, which was the vutal hamizbeach. On the mizbeach there was a fire that came from heaven in the shape of a lion, which would eat up the karbanis, and then the human being is able to emerge. Hine, mach mazeh, please look inside. Mach, because of this, gam nefesh haba misha b'kol echad v'echad miYisrael, even the animal soul in each person, hoya nismaya, becomes softer. V'nichol b'kedusha, and it becomes included in holiness. And becoming included in holiness means he gets quieter. The Nefesh HaBahamis can be very holy, but it makes a lot of noise. You incorporating him into Kedusha, you should be a little quieter. Why do you want him to be a little quieter? Because you want to give voice to what's deeper and what's finer. Let's read. Ad shekol echad v'echad, that each person, it allowed for each person to connect his mind and his understanding to the greatness of the Eibishter, to focus on the Lakus in a Chabad way, in a Pneumistic way, lihibot leilov, to become bottled to the Eibishter. You should know there's a whole movement in 770 amongst the Bachrim in the last few years, to the Israelis, to do davening, Avodah Satfil. They made Avodah Satfil the whole religion of Avodah Satfil. You know what it is? Everyone picks on one idea in Lubavitch, the whole Lubavitch. Everything in Lubavitch to be fixed if the Bachram daven barichas. So everyone's got to daven barichas, and they make programs, and they make books, and they make seminars, and it's beautiful, but it's not true. There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of pathways to heaven. Everybody has their own derech, but it's beautiful to see this koch and Avodah Satfil. It's a whole big deal. A koch and davening, right? But who davens? The Bachram daven. The older people, including the Mashpiyim, don't have time. I mean, look at me. I mean, when do I daven? Sometimes on Shabbos, I say the words, you know what I'm saying? But for davening, you have to have time. And Bachrim have a lot of good intentions, but they don't have the skills. To be able to daven, a Chabad davening requires a few things. Number one, a very, very strong mind. A strong mind. Number two, real concentration. And number three, and I think probably more than anything else, this is what Bachrim lack, is an ability to relax and focus. The key to focus is calming down. You're not going to concentrate by being nervous. And it's a skill that you have to learn over time. And kids of 16, 17 years old, those are the ones who are davening barichas, because by the time they're 21, they're retired, unfortunately. The intentions are there, the will is there, but the skill isn't there. In other words, when you get older, you're more shaykhs to tefillah, not when you're younger. But unfortunately, when you get older, you care about other things. Avodah tefillah is in your pnimi. And one of the keys to Avodah tefillah is quieting down and davening. I read someplace, there was a very, very special Talmud who's not talked about enough because he never passed away very, very young. His name is Rabbi David Pevner. Avram David, not Avram Baruch. Avram Baruch Pevner is very famous. But Avram David Pevner is not so well known. The Frierdiker says in a Sikha that when Avram David Pevner was in yeshiva, my father did not write his own Maimorim because he trusted the Anochas of Avram David. Can you imagine that? Frierdiker says, when Avram David Pevner was at Achei Temimim, the Tate, my father, would miss writing many of the Maimorim. What do you need? Is it a Yud Beis, Yud Alf, Yud Beis? We stole the whole pile. Take one. Just take anyone.
Mine is
Huh?
specifically mine.
Can everyone take a look to see if they have the book that belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. Oh, okay, so Machon. Oh, you see that? Thank you for disturbing us, and I mean that. He learns, and he davens. So this is from David. So imagine the Frierdiker writes that the Rebbe Rashab trusted his anochas.
What's your relationship to Rami?
Distant relatives. This Avram David, Avram Klubitsch, he passed away at 34 years old. All the Pevners and Lubavitch are related. My grandmother's also Pevner. My great grandmother's also Pevner. We're all related. We're all descendants of the Alter Rebbe's brother, the Mordechai. So I'm somehow we're related. How many generations back, I don't know. But he was a very special person. And he would daven all day long. And he didn't have permission from the Rebbe Rashab to eat before davening. He pushed fasted every day. And he complained once to the Rebbe Rashab about it. And the Rebbe Rashab said these words. It's a wonderful quote. Tracht leicht, which means think soft. Some people think that this is concentration. And it's not true, it's nerves. It's a headache. Trachten is this. Yeah, but when I do this, my mind wanders. So how do you relax and your mind doesn't wander? It's work. The beginning of the work, you have to learn Chassidus. You have to be in a certain frame of mind. You have to learn Chassidus. Enough Chassidus to be in a holier space. And then you have to have the ability to focus. In this Maimed, it's described in much more basic terms. The animal makes a lot of noise. And young people are very, very strong animals. And when they use their animals for Avodas Hashem, they're amazing. But it's an animal. It's noisy. So the carbon consists, first of all, of quieting the animal, and second of all, allowing the man, the seichel, which he calls here das and bina, the gedulas Hashem, the but love to emerge. So the carbon has these two aspects: the sacrifice of the animal, the quieting of the animal, to allow the man to emerge. You know how it was on the Mizbeach. Mizbeach burnt wood and meat. Wood and meat are full of water, full of moisture. So it makes a lot of noise. The fire was very, very noisy. But eventually the fire wins. And the water dries out. And when the water dries out, the meat becomes carbon and it burns like paper. So in the beginning, the fire is very noisy. And in the end, the fire is very quiet. But that quiet fire is actually hotter than the noisy fire before. You ever go to a bivouac, you know, campfires? So you make a big a teepee, whatever you do, from the Boy Scouts, you make a whole thing out of wood and you burn it, and then a couple of hours later, there's embers left. It's 2:00 in the morning and everybody's asleep, but you're going to stay up all night because you're a Meshuggah, and you have these red hot pieces of wood. They're pure fire, they're charcoal. The fire is very, very hot at that point. Why? Because the moisture's gone. Now you just have fuel. That's what happened on the Mizbeach. The animal was burnt, the moisture was extracted, and it got quiet and deep. And the mind could work. So the Rebbe says, now we do it through davening. So the Machtas HaShekel in Pnimius is for Karbonis, which is for Tefillah. Now, how does that explain why you have 6 psukim to explain Machtas HaShekel? So he explains. However, here's the deal. For this to work, for a person to bring a carbon correctly, or in Golos, for a person to daven correctly. And davening correctly begins with exciting your animal soul in Avodas Hashem because of the animal interests. But then to quiet that animal soul and get the animal soul to start thinking like a human being with his mind. Says the Rebbe, for that process to happen, you have to have support that comes first from the Eibishter, and that comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. Shezehu inyan hanasiyas reish ayidei Moshe. You have a tzaddik who is deeply, deeply connected to the Eibishter, and he gives koiches. This is a foundational idea in Torah, and it's certainly a foundational idea in Chassidus. Everybody has a job to do. And when you do it by yourself, it's very hard. But if you have your job to do, and you have a connection to Moshe Rabbeinu, and you're not one of those people who's patient, you don't turn your back to Moshe Rabbeinu, you appreciate the fact that you need to get koiches from Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu helps you serve the Eibishter. He doesn't take away your free will, doesn't do it for you. but he empowers you. He makes it doable. Let's read. It's not just the original Moshe Rabbeinu. In every generation there's Moshe Rabbeinu, a Rebbe Tzaddik. Right? When you have a relationship with a Rebbe, when you go to the oil, and you write a pidyon, or you stand and you say Tillim, and your neshama and the Rebbe's neshama become intimately connected, it gives you a koyach for Avodas Hashem. It gives you a koyach for Avodas Hashem. Just last night, someone sent me an audio, and I never listen to these things. A long story, where a guy in California has a dream, and the Rebbe is talking to him about giving tzedakah. The Rebbe is talking about giving tzedakah. And the Rebbe tells him, if you give tzedakah, it'll be good for you. So in the dream, he says to the Rebbe, whatever the Rebbe will tell me to do, I'll do. So he says, give $1,250 to a shliach by this and this name. He says, okay. So the Rebbe says, you know what I'm talking about? In the dream, you know what I'm talking about? He says, I guess so, I think so. He says, okay. Anyway, the guy wakes up, and he remembers the dream, he doesn't remember the name. So he starts asking people. He found a shliach in Argentina with a similar name, and he sends him $1,250. Months later, he's sitting with some family members, and somebody says, there's a shliach, this and this place, someplace in the Caribbean, who's a relative of somebody else, and his name is such and such, and it's the name that the Rebbe told him in the dream 6 months before, or 4 months before. So he says, he was sitting there, he says, this guy? So one of the people says to him, the Rebbe's words exactly, you know him? And it was like this woman who asked him the question, you know him, was supposed to speak in the Rebbe's words. He was so taken aback, he couldn't speak. 4 months before, the Rebbe tells him that exactly, it's 1,020 to a shliach that has no idea, he didn't even know his name. And the Rebbe asks him, you know him? And then 4 months later, somebody asks him, the Rebbe's words, you know him? In Yiddish, du kennst him? Anyway, he sends the guy the money with a message. He says, I don't know you, but you should know that the Rebbe is thinking about you. Because I'm a stranger to you. And I had you 4 months ago. And the Rebbe told me, I'm thinking, and the way he tells the story, Moshe Paltiel tells the story, was that in 1942, his father was the Frierdiker Rebbe of Chassidus, and he told the Frierdiker Rebbe that when I leave here, I feel very lonely. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, you should never feel lonely, that anytime you're doing for lyhadus, I am with you. That's how he starts this story. You know, I have a similar thing in my own life. The Rebbe sends messages to people. I'm thinking about you. I can't tell you the details at the moment, but it's unbelievable. I'm thinking about you and I love you. That's true, I love you. And I'm lifting you up. This is an Nesinus Koyach. The work you got to do. But Moshe Rabbeinu helps. When you understand that a Yiddu wants to connect to Hashem, and the connection to Hashem is like a carbon, you got to deal with the animal first. And if you deal with the animal first, the human being can subsequently emerge. You should know before you started even dealing with your animal, Moshe Rabbeinu helps you. Ki tisas reish b'nei Yisrael. Moshe lifts us up. Let's read the words. Ki tisa es reish b'nei Yisrael. Look inside. Moshe lifts up the heads of the Jewish people, and he translates. Moshe uraya mehem. Moshe is the loyal and trust shepherd, or to say it in the Chassidish terms, Moshe is the shepherd of faith. Moshe Rabbeinu's role is that he shepherds, which means he provides mezenis and parnasa. We talked about this earlier in the year Barich is for the Jewish people with Amunah. Or as the Pasuk says, he shepherds faith. Right? You have a Rav and you have a Rosh Yeshiva. What does a Rav do? Anybody? He passes Chassidus. He studies halacha, and the most important thing is not how much I understand or what's the different opinion, just what should I do? And then you have a Rosh Yeshiva. Rosh Yeshiva's job is not tell you what to do. Rosh Yeshiva's job is telling you why. And to go back to the source, and to see the different shittas. And to understand the different svaras, to appreciate why this one is machmir, this one is mekel. And then halacha becomes like this, right? And then you have a Rebbe. A Rebbe doesn't teach halacha. A Rebbe doesn't teach lumdis. So what does the Rebbe teach? Of course, he teaches Chassidus. Says the Rebbe, yeah, that's what he's doing on the outside. But what the Rebbe is doing is giving emunah. I have a cousin of mine I speak to from time to time. He tells me the Rebbe doesn't give emunah, the Rebbe gives bitachon. And there's legitimacy to that, but we'll leave that for a different time. A Rebbe's job is to touch the soul of a Jew. That's his job. A Rebbe is a neshama human being, and his relationship with us is on a soul level. When the Rebbe meets a Yid, he stirs his neshama. The Rebbe has a special neshama feather which he wanders around the world and he tickles Jewish souls wherever they may be and arouses them and he wakes them up. And it becomes our job to pick up these souls. It becomes our job to be a dugma chaya, to be a living example of what a Yid is, that they should want to follow our lead. It becomes our job to teach these souls. It becomes our job to include these souls in our communities. But the Rebbe wakes up the neshama. The Rebbe wakes up the neshama. The Rebbe wakes up the neshama. A Yid stellt sich davenin. A Yid is going to daven before he even began to daven. Moshe Rabbeinu lifted up his soul. Ki tisas eish b'nei Yisrael. And that's what's going on here. You want to understand why you have 6 psukim of machzah shekel to make a point takes a pasuk and a half, and the answer is machzah shekel is karbonis. Machzah shekel is avodas atfilah. Avodas atfilah is a process. The process of avodas atfilah starts with Moshe Rabbeinu. Al yedei Torah v'gamach. And how does Moshe strengthen our emunah? Through Torah mitzvahs. He teaches us Torah, he encourages us to do mitzvahs, but in his Torah v'gamach, there is an infusion of emunah. And through this, nasa hanasiyas, v'hagbos, reish b'nei Yisrael, it lifts up the Yidden's head, the best of a Jew, Hainu Allah, mulmato lamayla, which is in a sense from a lower level to a higher level, which is done through karbonis and tefillah. Davening and karbonis are considered from the bottom up. And when we are trying to raise ourselves from the bottom up, when we daven, starting with the animal and then graduating to the man, we should know that Moshe is lifting our head. Moshe is lifting our head to help us daven. So the answer to the question, assuming the question is, Machtes HaShekel, the way it's written in the Torah, happened once. Machtes HaShekel, the way it happens in Halacha, 1.5 psukim out of 6. Why do you have those 6 psukim? And the answer is, when you study Nigla the Torah, you have to study it with Nista. There's a halachas of Machtes HaShekel that attracts out from these psukim. They're only just many words. The Chassidus of Machtes HaShekel needs all these words. Because the Chassidus of Machtes HaShekel, which is the source of the halacha of Machtes HaShekel, is about tefillah, about sacrificing the animal and bringing the person closer, and this requires a koyach of the neshama, and that koyach of the neshama we get from Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's called Kiti Sesrei. She raises up our heads. Now we're not finished. Why? Because we just learned pages Chazayin and Chavches. Now we're going to go to the bottom of Lamed Gimel. Okay? And we're going to study the rest of the details about Machtes HaShekel. And the more we learn, the more you'll see how every single word in Parshas Machtes HaShekel speaks to this Nakuda. This is what I told you last week. When you study Chumash and you understand that only in Nigla, it's written funny. When you study Chumash and you understand also the Chassidus, it's written precisely. Moshe Rabbeinu lifts up the heads of the Jewish people. At that time, it meant to count. But everybody knows that kitisa doesn't mean to count, it means to raise up. So why use a funny word? Why use the word to count, lift up heads? Say ki tisper, ki timne, ki tifkoid. Why say ki tisa? Because the Torah is telling Moshe Rabbeinu to count Yidden at that time, but the Torah is telling Moshe Rabbeinu something which is negay for all times. And the role of Moshe Rabbeinu is to lift up Yidden. And which part of a Yid is he lifting up? The head of a Yid. And when Moshe Rabbeinu lifts up the head of the Yid by infusing him with the chayas of emunah, the Yid is able to daven, sacrifice his animal and bring his person close. So there's more to learn. But this is the end of Perek Beis. Questions or comments?